The hour of 7:30 having arrived, I'll call the meeting of the Town Council to order. We'll rise to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Moving on into the agenda, we have approval of minutes of June 27th. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Made by Mr. Gallagher, seconded by Mr. Souza. Any discussion, Mr. Gallagher?
Nope.
Mr. Souza?
No.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to announcements from the president, I'd like to take a moment of silence for all those we've lost in the town, especially for John A. McCourt. Mr. McCourt served aboard LST 1056 in the USS Endicott in the United States Navy Asian Pacific Theater of Operations during World War II. So if we could take a moment to remember him and all those others we've lost since our last meeting. Thank you. Moving on to proclamations, we have none. Citizens open forum. Seeing none. We'll move on to appointments, annual reappointments. We have 25 annual reappointments, and I will ask if it's the council's pleasure to appoint them as a group. We could do that if someone makes a motion to so do.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we appoint the annual reappointments as listed.
I second it.
Made by Mr. Gallagher, seconded by Mr. George. Discussion, Mr. Gallagher?
Just thank them all for stepping up to the plate, and I'm sure there's a lot of names on here that I am sure all of you know that want to continue to serve, so I say thank you.
Mr. George?
I agree.
Further discussion?
Same sentiments.
Seeing none, all those in favor of appointing all of these folks back to their various boards and committees, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to hearings, we have none. Moving on to licensed transactions, we have none. Moving on to presentations, Skip's Liquors, update. Not here yet. Okay. We're going to move then on to Mr. Diaonono, Community Economic Development Housing Production Plan update. Thank you for coming, Mr. Diaonono.
My pleasure, Mr. President.
Good evening.
Okay, seems they gave these, semi-annual updates on what was going on in the Community and Economic Development Department, but I think it's been some time. I think we're beyond the 6 months. So you have before you a short list of talking points, and I won't read them verbatim, but I'll just give a flavor of what each are, and then I can take your questions as they come. So first priority, MassWorks grant. It's that time of year again, and having debriefed with personnel at DHCD, the Office of Business Development, and others upstate, we found what our critical errors were on last year's grant submission, and we'll work to rectify those for this year. MassWorks grants, for those of you that aren't aware, are oriented towards achieving economic development or housing goals. In our case, the priority is Elm Street and the reconstruction of Elm Street. We have approximately $50 million in assessed value out there, and a very poor road that needs to be literally reconstructed from the base up. So you have the details before you. The deadline is August 4th. One critical component that we will need for that MassWorks submission is 25% engineering drawings. One of the things that the state looks for in awarding MassWorks grants is having, I hate to use this phrase because it's often overused, shovel-ready projects, and the commitment to that is having 25% drawings. In speaking with the state, they will accept some type of a commitment from the town of Bridgewater that we would fund the 25% drawings and have that design work ready in anticipation of the spring construction season. Number 2, the planning board. Planning board's working on tweaking the rules and regulations, mostly technical specifications in the subdivision regs. But one of the things that's come to the fore is the difficulty that the highway department has in plowing, particularly small cul-de-sacs or roads with few units, residential units on it. One of the recommendations I've made to the planning board is to require developers, when they're proposing 10 units or less, to have some type of arrangement to keep those ways private so as not to burden the town and the general taxpayer. Number 3, affordable housing. We are in the midst of updating our housing production plan. I did get some bad news about a week ago. I think it was just before the 4th of July. Eric Arbini, who is the project manager at the Old Colony Planning Council, is leaving his position there and going to Serped. So that's a loss that will be felt not just for the housing production plan, but I think for many reasons. Eric is a wealth of knowledge and a real asset to OCPC and the communities that participate in the regional planning organization. So tomorrow we're having a meeting with Old Colony Planning Council to formulate a Plan B in Eric's absence, and I'll be able to give you more information after that meeting. That's number 1. We did have the first public meeting in updating the housing production plan, and it was well attended. Some council members were there, and we had some good questions. We did a lot of background research, and we'll utilize that in the update. One of the things that's pretty clear in everything that's in the pipeline and through the comprehensive permitting process, we will, over the next couple of years, achieve and exceed our 10% mandate for affordable housing. And as such, I think it's imperative that the town redouble its efforts in developing an inclusionary zoning component so that we can maintain that 10% going forward and utilize those resources in infill development and other goals and policies that are coming out that are in the current housing production plan and will come out of the update. That is a critical component and something that should be worked on in the next 6 months. Just to give an update on major projects, major affordable projects, Viva, which is the second phase of the Claremont 40B, is in site certification, and they have filed some revised documents and plans to satisfy DHCD. Duxboro Estates is in the comprehensive permit process before the ZBA, and Pratt Town is under construction. We're going to put a plug in here for the paid parking program. I know some of the council members are sick of my saying this, but I'm going to say it again. I think it's imperative to have a paid parking program to be able to utilize those revenues for public infrastructure improvements in and around the square especially. I think it'll be self-sustaining. As a matter of fact, I'm fairly certain it'll be self-sustaining. We have interest from from private sector parking management firms to operate that program, and also support from Bridgewater State University. So that's my plug for paid parking. The zoning code. I know recently happened to be on vacation, so my apologies. I do every once in a while take a vacation. You had an item before you about the zoning code revisions. Our zoning code is, let's say, subpar. It needs to be revamped, and just as important, We need to have a build-out analysis performed to identify inconsistencies in our current zoning and fresh areas for commercial development. The code, as it's currently written, is out of date. It's poorly formatted. There are errors and inconsistencies. And that type of an effort, particularly to depoliticize it, should probably be done by an outside entity. There is one other zoning item I'd like to mention, and hopefully we'll see this before council sooner rather than later. Easy Street, which is a residential subdivision immediately adjacent to the gravel operation BRS, is zoned as Industrial A and therefore largely a legal non-conforming situation. I don't know how that was done or how it was promulgated. I've had conversations with town council about this, former town council, current town council, and I think the cleanest and neatest way to do it is just to rezone that residential subdivision as residential AB. Complete Streets, Howard Stein Hudson is moving right along. We had a lot of email conversations today. I've got a conference call tomorrow with Howard Stein Hudson. They're tweaking the Complete Streets prioritization plan and coming up with cost analyses for the major projects. They're working away on the pedestrian safety assessment component for downtown, and we'll hopefully see a draft of that soon. Which is a good segue to downtown redevelopment. The downtown plan, the existing downtown master plan, is largely predicated on private development, as you know. And the key to that is residential density. Key to commercial development downtown is residential density. We don't see any projects that are availing themselves of last year's zoning revisions to increase residential density for mixed uses. Hopefully, we will have some before us in the not-too-distant future. We've had numerous conversations with developers. They just haven't pulled the trigger yet. So that is my update in a nutshell.
Thank you. Questions for the, Mr. Diano? Mr. George.
President, through you to Andrew. So thank you for the report. Couple things. On MassWorks grant, the 25% engineering drawings, do you have an idea of what the cost of that would be and how long it would take to get that?
The town engineer and working in concomitance with others is going to get us a rough idea of what that'll cost. So I don't have,
Okay.
Councilor George, an answer for you right now, but we'll have an idea of that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Second question, on the Claremont development, is there going to be any commercial included in that development as well, or strictly residential?
They are getting ready to permit a new 4-story office building. It's not done in concomitance with their 40B or comprehensive permit application, but they are preparing, and actually I have had conversations with their engineer. I believe it's Meridian Engineering. So that should be coming in shortly.
Okay, great. And one more. So downtown development, Old Friendlies, Old Bob's buildings. Do we have anything in play that can help us just, I mean, I know Friendlies is just coming online because of the closing, but that Old Bob's building eventually is going to fall down. And it's right in the middle of town. Do we have any conversations with the current owner about finally dispositioning that property so that we can get something out of it?
Private developers have had numerous conversations with the property owner, and I'm not aware of anything that's happened in at least that I'm aware of. But we don't have a lot of, I guess, it's private development. It's a private property, and you know.
And I understand it's owned by a private individual. I guess my question is, are we actively trying to pursue businesses to engage the owner to finally get that building into some sort of usage for?
The owner has had numerous conversations that I'm aware of with other potential owners, and nothing has happened. So whether the sticking points are the building itself, the state of the building, potential hazardous materials, price, I don't know, but that's between two private parties. We do everything we can in our offices, whether it's in licensing, in the building department, health, Board of Health, community and economic development, planning, zoning, to help private property owners get from concept to finished product. You know, AL Prime's a good example. They've come across a couple of hiccups. We've worked with them to make sure that their project goes as smoothly as possible. So anything we can do. But again, we have limited resources and a limited ability to affect what happens with private property.
Okay, how about the Old Friendlies building?
Similarly, we had numerous conversations with potential purchasers. My understanding of that building has always been, the sticking point has been price.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Mr. Souza.
Yes, whatever happened to the Claremont proposal on 100 units of a upscale apartment complex? Claremont? There was talk at one time that they were going to build a 100-unit upscale 1- and 2-bedroom apartment complex way in the back.
Well, that is the 40B application is 300 units, some of which are affordable, Mr. Souza.
Okay, so it was changed from the upscale to a 40B?
I was not aware of 100 units of upscale housing, but there was talk of 200 market units, 200 plus market units. I don't know if they were upscale or not, but they were market units. But that would have required a zoning change, and my understanding it was that council was reluctant to do that for obvious reasons.
Further questions? Mr. Haley, then Mr. Perry.
Just brief on point number 2 with regard to the subdivisions. With 10 or fewer residential units, keep the ways private. I know that we've seen multiple times here at the council that the private way gets flipped to public. Is there any kind of write-in within that prevents them from doing it at a particular length of time?
I think the assurances would have to be that there'd be a mechanism to have associations or other mechanisms so as not to shift the burden to the general taxpayer. Nothing guarantees that anyone has the ability to come petition council to have their road accepted. Nothing will ever change that. So it's up to council at that point to say, you knew what the deal was when you were going into it.
And I'd just add to Mr. Haley's comment before I go to Mr. Perry. It sometimes can be a very hard argument that I live in a house on a road in the town and I pay the same taxes you do, and I'm not getting the same services as you do. So that's always the tension. So, Mr. Perry.
Thank you. Just a question again on the parking program. Do we have a potential time frame that we're looking to potentially get this going? Are we just still on the ground roots of talking about it? Where are we in this particular process?
I've done significant research. The town manager has an RFP ready to go. It's just a matter of having council's buy-in, and we could pull the trigger on an ordinance and the RFP, and probably we could. At this point, the fall is probably too ambitious, but certainly by the spring, we could have a full-blown parking program.
Thank you.
Ms. Loesch. Ms. Loesch. Oh. Sorry. I saw you, but I was looking that way to see if I needed to grab someone else
That would freak me out, too. Triangle offense.
My question's more about how are we attracting new business. I remember a while back, I was driving on 24 and West Bridgewater's had big billboards that says, come to West Bridgewater and open your business. And I was like, oh, that's cute. I don't have any business to open. What kind of programs are we doing? And then with that, do we have any stats on things that or organizations that we've courted and lost and the reasons why?
It's hard to, good questions, Ms. Loesch. We don't have an active marketing program aside from working with Bridgewater Business Association, with the local banks and so on, to realtors, which are an important component, but we don't have the resources for an active marketing component. However, I can say that since my tenure began here, we've worked hard to streamline permitting. to try and get people through the process, to get the boards and commissions, because they're really the important component, to buy into the idea that we are partners. It's a collaborative process to get somebody to locate their business here, and they're making a big commitment. And I think we've had some success. You see now the fruits of Elm Street, for example, Lucini bus lines, Devaney propane. I won't mention the cannabis industry that sometimes gets dicey, but so the fruit, we're not quite there yet. We recently ran into some problems permitting Copart, which is a $7 billion corporation, and that was unfortunate. However, we have, the town manager and I have had conversations with other potential property owners on Elm Street, and while I can't really talk about it in a public forum because they're just conversations at this point, they would make a really nice addition to the Elm Street corridor. But again, they will point to things that, the condition of the road. The condition of the road is not, for one particular property owner, is really important. They need to get their trucks in and out of there, and they don't want any hiccups. So the condition of Elm Street is important, and hence the emphasis on something like MassWorks. So in terms of marketing, we do what we can. Word of mouth goes a long way. I think we have an excellent reputation compared to what it was. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of your question.
Stats.
Oh,
How do we know, what have we
it's
got?
hard to tell when a business just doesn't consider you. Because if we don't get a phone call, aside from maybe Google Analytics, I don't know how else we would track that. Because so often today, as you and I will do if we're considering a hotel in a strange city, we'll just go on, TripAdvisor, and who would know if we didn't book it, right? So.
Other questions? Mr. Columbotus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Diaiono, there's a lot of vowels in there. It's hard. I think we all have.
Sorry about that.
Same thing. So it seems like an overall concern among the council and people in town at large is economic development, attracting private investment. How do we do it? Can you maybe address how some of these initiatives tie into that overall mission? It seems, like you said, a lot of residents on Elm Street want an improved road surface, better infrastructure. How can improving our zoning help to attract private investment? How would that be helpful in that way?
Our zoning code, I like to say, and people who work with me and around me are sick of my saying that most zoning codes are 90% black and white and 10% subject to interpretation. And that's why we have a zoning officer and a ZBA. Our code kind of turns that upside down. I'd say 90% of it is subject to interpretation. There are all kinds of loopholes, and you have to look for certain criteria and definitions when they should exist in a different part of the code. There are all these, you have to sort of cross-reference all different types of things. Businesses don't want to see that. They want to see something that's clear-cut. Coparts is a good example. They reluctantly went into permitting because there was an issue as to whether or not their use was even permitted on Elm Street. And frankly, in an industrial area, some of these things shouldn't be allowed by special permit. They should be allowed by right. That's why you create these zones. You zone for things you want and you don't want. So if there's a question mark, you don't just make it a special permit. You say, I don't want it there. So these are the types of things that we can redress in a zoning revamp. I think the other side of that is, and I firmly believe, that there are important commercial corridors into town, main thoroughfares like Main Street, that have the potential for mixed use. Pleasant is another. I don't think Bedford Street has seen full potential. So there are areas and there are uses that possibly we haven't considered, modern uses that we need to include in the zone. Things like online sales. We don't have a category for that. So to us, in our zoning code, it's not allowed. So you have to go for a variance. That's crazy.
Predictability is what private investors want to see.
Absolutely.
And I think you bring up a good point with this sort of adding perhaps more commercial zones. Where right now we have in the central business district, goes directly from central business district to, you cross over 5 feet and it's residential and there are no commercial uses. I know Mr. Souza's talked about some sort of transitional use for Main Street, for example, where you allow some commercial uses, but not uses that would have a really negative impact on what is largely a residential neighborhood.
DBAs that come through our offices very often are steeped in things like home occupations, right? So the types of things that cottage industries for today's world, and that's really the lifeblood of places like Bridgewater. There's a real entrepreneurial spirit, and you want to tap into that. You don't want to send people through a ZBA process for something that's questionable. We recently had a young lady who wanted to do a doggy daycare on Elm Street, and she had to get a use variance, which she got. And you can, again, it's a policy decision on whether or not that's an acceptable use in an industrial area. But I mean, she had to jump through a lot of hoops for that. In the end, she didn't end up getting a lease. So it wasn't for lack of our trying to get her her business situated in Bridgewater. But I think she's subsequently found another location in another area where it is allowed.
And one more point where I'd like to tie in some of these initiatives to the overall goal of encouraging commercial development. To what extent and how can the Complete Streets program and infrastructure improvements, how can they help on Broad Street, for example, to draw private investment?
Right, having a livable, walkable downtown is critical to encouraging commercial development, because if you don't feel comfortable walking downtown, you can't piggyback off the initiatives like Music Alley. If you don't feel comfortable just hanging out because of the truck traffic or motorcycles revving 3 or 4 feet from your ear, then you're not going
It's a tough sell.
Right, you're not going to patronize the businesses that are downtown.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions for the town planner? Mr. Haley?
A couple more. So I know you discuss briefly not having a lot of statistics, but are there reasons that you hear back from folks that have chosen not to, that you were at some level of discussions with, however deep? And also, on that question as well, do we have any that state a lack of available, viable, existing structures for space?
To your first question, Mr. Haley, I do hear back periodically from businesses that either chose to go somewhere else, and usually it's lack of space or inadequate space. Maybe their use wasn't allowed where they care to locate it. And again, that points to why the zoning code should be revamped. Sometimes it's something as simple as the road is in a bad state, and that just doesn't suit my purposes. Other times it's, I couldn't get a lease. Private parties could not come to terms on acquiring property. So it really runs the gamut. I think we are fairly, I think with identifying fresh commercial areas and opening up opportunities to expand the commercial tax base, it will serve Bridgewater well for years to come, because that's the one key component that I see lacking. And sitting in my office in the basement, it's pretty clear to me when I look at the map, there's overwhelmingly residential on that zoning map and not a lot of commercial. And so, really targeting those opportunities, I think, is critical. The second part of your question, I'm sorry, I forgot that too.
Yeah, you basically answered within that you mentioned lack of existing space. On that same note, if I may continue on a little further, existing property owners with available space. We have a lot of those that stick around for a while available. Knowing that you did say marketing is not part of your active marketing program, does not exist. Do you, however, have a working relationship with these property owners and keep an ear open, or maybe keep their ears open to fulfilling that available space?
Always. When someone comes to our office, whether it's hospitality, restaurant use, or retail, and they have a need for space, we always identify key properties for them to investigate, whether it's on Pleasant Street whether it's Elm Street, whether it's down on Broad Street, and we kind of assist in that process. Anytime anyone reaches out to us, on the commercial side particularly, we open up all the avenues we have available to us, whether it's doing some research for them, pulling assessors' cards, putting them in touch with the right parties. You need to talk to this person, you need to talk to that person. So we do whatever we can in that regards. Again, it boils down to being able to cinch a deal.
Lastly, if I were to hear of someone that wanted to consider Bridgewater for either new or existing space, are you and your department who I would send them to, rather than saying, well, I know this property and this owner, or did just you funnel them right through you?
We are always, we don't mean to interject ourselves, but certainly sometimes we have resources at our disposal that we can make a phone call. I can pick up the phone and call a realtor and say, you talk to this person, and have done that on many occasions, whether it's on Broad Street, Elm Street, or elsewhere. Either way, both. You know, we do whatever we can to get people to locate their businesses or grow their businesses here in Bridgewater. And I do mean anything we can.
Right, because, same question, sorry to take so much time. Because of the reason that Mr. Columbotus mentioned, that there is an obvious interest in filling up our town with viable companies, and kind of vibrant downtown would be especially nice. But if we don't have that resource, if there's 10 different realtors, 15 different landowners, it would really be nice. I don't know if there's an inventory that could be kept or is kept for available commercial property.
We can certainly do that. That's something we can work on, particularly in the winter months when things get slower.
Sure.
Further questions for Mr. Dianona? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much for all your work, Mr. Dianona.
My pleasure.
Certainly appreciate you coming in and giving us the update. Clearly, it's a topic of interest.
Anytime. Thank you.
Without objection from the town council, I'd like to recognize the Mandela Washington Fellows who have come to visit us tonight from their program at Bridgewater State College. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. I don't know if you want to come up and say hi at the microphone. We're not going to grill you with any questions or anything like that, but if anyone wants to come up and say hi, please feel free. And we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much for honoring our presence and all protocol observed. My name is Flavia Kalule Nabagawe. I come from Uganda, the Pearl of Africa. I'm a politician. I contested as Member of Parliament last year back home, and I emerged second, so I'll be going for a rerun, a by-election next year. I'm happy that I see amidst you some people that I have already met and have already interacted with. My key role back home is to build capacities of local government councillors and members of parliament in their roles and responsibilities. So I'm very interested in what you're doing right now. These are some of the things we promote, especially women's participation in leadership. I'm very happy to see you. And I hope to interact with you later. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I hope I can have my colleagues introduce themselves as well. And hopefully we can have a group photo with you all at the end.
Well, we're just happy to have you here to listen and watch local government in action. And anyone who wants to step up and say hello, we're certainly welcome to hear.
Good evening, all. My name is Tikale Ngwale. You can call me Tika. I'm from Zambia. I work for the Anti-Corruption Commission. I usually work with politicians, and I usually work with people like you, especially during planning of disbursement of resources, funds. So I'm happy to be part of you and to be listening to your debates about how you are planning for your town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura. Laura is from Cameroon. Cameroon is found at the western part of Africa. Cameroon is a bilingual country. So we speak English and French officially. Back home, I work as a legal practitioner. I trained as a magistrate. Normally, we observe the French system where magistrates are judges and prosecutors. So that is exactly my role. Back home, I really don't participate in town planning meetings because of we have certain rules and observations. As a legal practitioner, a judge, you need to, you just sit and wait for them in front of your desk. But most often than not, I have the opportunity of prosecuting and sentencing most of town planners who don't do their jobs well.
You hear that, Andrew?
All those who are involved in corrupt practices, particularly the embezzlement of public funds, wherein in my country, a committee has been set up specially just for investigation of embezzlement of public funds. And we have various qualifications as to which offense attracts what sentence. And so for the past 8 to 10 years, I've been doing that now. So I'm a little bit versed with, what goes behind the doors, with government money when it comes to my table. I'm a Mandela Washington Fellow 2016, just like my other peers, 2017, just like my other peers here, sorry. And we'll be here for 6 weeks. We're already running out of the 4th week. So we have basically 2 more weeks, and we round up in Washington, and there we depart to our various countries. Apart from that, I'm involved in a lot of community work, community service, because normally as a Mandela Washington Fellow, you ought to have proven your worth at the community level, to prove what you do as engagement back in the community, how you enhance the community. Of course, being a magistrate, being a judge, behind my table, I don't get the opportunity of mixing up with the community, but I do other community works where I make myself accessible to the community, helping them, particularly the women, the girls involved in gender-based violence. It's an honor, it's a pleasure being with you all. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good call, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Councillors of the Bridgewater Town Council and members of the gallery. My name is Jacqueline Amongin, and I am a member of the Mandela Washington 2017, and I happen to be a member of parliament in Uganda, and I also represent my parliament in the African Union Parliament. I'm definitely honored to hear from you. But not only that, I am more interested when I come to this hall, I have an interest of liaising with my town council where I am in Uganda and this town council so that there is an exchange. They come and appreciate what you do. And you also come to Uganda and appreciate how town councils are run there. So when I'm in this room, I'm just excited that we have the town planner, we have the chairman, and we have the honorable councillors, and I'm sure that cultural exchange is one of the areas of this council. Therefore, Pearl of Africa is the destination to be, and that's Uganda. And I'm the link. In terms of...
Now there's some community planning right there.
Yeah, and then, definitely. And back home, I sit in at the National Parliament. I'm a member of Public Accounts Committee, so we try to analyze all those questions you will arising in terms of getting public servants accountable for the public resources. So I'm in that committee, and in the African Union, I chair the Committee of Agriculture, Natural Resources and Environment. So basically, my interest is making friends and connecting friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, just so everyone realizes, in Bridgewater, this is like having Stephen Lynch at our council meeting. Really.
The high ranking.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity. My name is Felinto Omar Martins Salah, and I come from Guinea-Bissau, which is the most beautiful in the country in the world. I'm a government official. I'm head of one of government agency, which is the National Youth Institute. Our responsibility is to ensure the coordination and implementation of youth policy and programs. And talking about youth, I'm from the ruling party, by the way. I'm a politician too. And talking about the youth, our government and parliament, it looks like that, like you.
Yeah.
But here is accurate to the demographic of your population. In Guinea-Bissau is not the case. In Guinea-Bissau, we have youth is defined from 15 to 35 years old. As in Africa, we have the African Youth Charter, which define these ages for young population. And in Guinea-Bissau, these the citizens below 36 years old represent 79%, more than 79% of the population. And they're not represented, neither in the parliament, neither in the government. And so there is no someone who advocate for their interest. That's why I'm going to leave this political party and start a new one in order, and we're going to run for the next year legislative election, and our goal is to reach 50% of young people representation in the parliament. And not only for that, to represent, because the difference between this council and our, when we put it in the national level, our parliament and government, is that here you're trying to improve people's lives. It's focused on development of both the people and the town. And it's not the case there. So there's lots of bad governance. I'm don't gonna make a list, but that's the reason we have to stand up and fight in order to promote good governance, and from that, the sustainable development of our country. Thank you.
Thank you.
All protocols observed. My name is Isaac Mwepa from Malawi, found in the southern part of Africa. I am an elected councillor, and I currently am serving as a mayor in my country. Through the chair, let me thank you for giving us this opportunity to introduce ourselves. We are really inspired the way you conduct your business here, because back home it's the same business that I conduct in my district council. So I'm really inspired, and I look forward to learn more from your deliberations. And as my colleague said, I would also, I'll be more happy to interact with you, even to bring councillors. Our house is made of 10 councillors and 5 members of parliament. So from the 10 councillors and 5 members of parliament, that's where we elect the mayor to chair our council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we should give everyone a...
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming, and don't feel like you have to stay for the whole thing. We encourage you to, but I understand you have a lot of commitments on your time, and it's a relatively light agenda, so we hopefully will move through relatively quickly. But we thank you very much for coming, and we welcome you to our town, and we're happy to hear about all of the great stuff you're doing. Moving on, we'll move back to Skip's Liquors update. I believe the gentleman from Skip's is here, so he can come on up and give us the update.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. Last time when I was here speaking in front of you in February, we told you guys that we'll be done in July, and by August we will be opening the store. Apparently, after I made that promise, we start construction work, and a few things adheres and gone the wrong way, and we have pretty much lost time. A lot of money involved in it as well, but I'm not giving up, and I have continued to progress that I have brought it to basically to start the project all over again, and we are pouring the concrete as we speak tomorrow, first thing in the morning, and we're stepping to the right foot this time. I'm also constantly staying over there while the construction is in the progress so that no errors can happen. And now, at this time, I do not have any rooms to make any errors and spend more money at times. We are expecting to be finished by end of October and open the store by November.
Thank you. Questions? I appreciate you coming in and giving us the update. You know, we, as a council, I believe, continue to be concerned that there's a big open hole in the middle of our town, and I understand you understand that as well. So we appreciate you moving forward with all due diligence on that, and certainly appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Moving on, presentation, Senior Center, Mr. Dutton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got a little bit of a slideshow this evening.
Slideshow.
F5.
Nope, to the right. Yeah, nope.
F5.
Oops, now I did it.
To the right, where it says slideshow on the top.
Oh, yeah.
Start from the beginning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The screen of death.
There we go.
It's
All right,
coming.
that was tough.
There it is.
Great. All right. I have a short presentation. This is designed to give you just sort of an overview of some of the more recent issues at the Senior Center and some of the more pressing capital needs that we're going to have to address over the short term and probably the long term. Excuse me. So, just an update on the kitchen and bath renovation. We did, I think as I had mentioned to the council a while back, we did get 2 bids. There really wasn't a range because there were 2 bids. One was $97,375. The other bid was $186,500. So obviously it was pretty simple to figure out who won that bid. At the same time, Elder Affairs Commission had voted to authorize $97,350 as an expenditure from the what we call the Hunt School Fund, and that covered just about covers the cost of. Actually, I'm going to go back. Covers the cost of the renovation. So where we stand now, we are almost finished. We've got 1 screen door that has been ordered. It's a special order since it's an oversized door, so that will be in within the next 3 weeks. Otherwise, we should be just about done. We have a little bit of work to do on the fire system, but that's being handled through the fire department with their help. So there were two major change orders. One was I didn't break it down, but it's $8,400 charge, and that was to cover the upgrades to the Ansel system. The Ansel system is the fire suppression that's in the hood of the above the stove. The other was less intensive. That was just a bathroom divider upgrade. We do have a little over $5,000 in credit coming back for things that we did not choose to do, and so we'll see that over the course of the next week or so. Just some brief pictures to show you what the place looks like. Actually, this is a couple of weeks ago, so it's a little more populated now with dishes and so forth. But obviously, the kitchen upgrade, the refrigerators are pre-existing. The stove over to your left is brand new. Replaces a similar one that had just basically worn out. One of the bathrooms, pretty pretty straightforward bathroom, but it is a nice upgrade over and above what was there. Just another picture of the bathroom. Clearly, this is the men's room. So we do have, moving on to some of the other needs that we have at the senior center. The parking lot, I think everybody's heard a lot about the parking lot. It just needs to be, at least the back parking lot and back of the building needs to be completely redone. Interior painting, we've actually secured the services of the Sheriff's Department, who is just coming off a paint job of the interior of the police station, and they will continue their work beginning end of this week or beginning of next week on the senior center. So supplies and the paint are covered by the town, and we estimate we're saving about $12,000 on that, and I think we'll get a nice professional job out of that. There are some roof repairs that I'll show you. As I think most of the councilors probably know, it's a metal roof. It was heavily damaged. Certainly the soffits and the gutters were heavily damaged 2 years ago. Much of that was repaired, but there's still plenty to be repaired. New doors, you'll see in some of the pictures coming up that we need new doors. Also window repairs, and we're estimating about $12,000 for that work. The cabinets, as you probably know, there are several different areas where there are cabinets, sort of built-in cabinets and counters, and those, as you will see in some pictures as I move ahead, are in pretty bad shape and do need to be replaced. Some less pressing items, the interior ceiling tile, those are showing their age and should probably be replaced completely. And some of the flooring is not in great shape along some stretches of the building. Some of it can be stripped and cleaned and waxed. Some of it probably needs to be replaced, but that's not nearly as intensive. So here's the rear parking lot. This is an issue that arose probably 5 years ago, and we had a bunch of different people working to try to figure out why it was doing this. Obviously, it had been in place for decades without, as far as I know, without any of this type of heaving. We sent cameras down through the drainage systems, and surprisingly found that the drainage systems were fairly well functioning, and that water was draining properly and exiting. We did find that the drain on the other side of the building was somewhat clogged up. We freed that up at the time, and I don't know if they're directly correlated with the heaving parking lot in this picture, but we did clean that out. So at this point, the best we can assume is that we need to grind the entire thing and repave it with a layer of coarse asphalt and then a finish layer. So it's usually a 3-inch and 1-inch process. The front, you've heard, I think, some stories about folks getting their heels stuck. This is a fairly good-sized crack. It's probably one of the larger ones in the front parking lot, but it is right by the front entrance, and is sort of indicative of the condition of the front parking lot as well. So we're, as I had mentioned earlier, we're estimating for the parking lot repairs roughly $100,000 to grind everything and regrade it a little bit and then repave it and do the final coat. So that's the parking lot. The interior, I mentioned some of the roof work that needs to be done, and you can see that there are some leaks here. These are not leaks coming from pipes. necessarily. These are leaks coming from ice dams that occurred, for the most part, 2 years ago, I think was the worst damage, and that was, it was damaging to a lot of buildings, but it sort of does speak to the fact that we need to do some roof repairs so that we can prevent these types of ice dams from occurring in the future. We have done a little bit of green communities work down there. One of the reasons that ice dams form is because a building is poorly insulated. And so we've done a little bit of work down there to try to prevent ice damming. But clearly, the larger project of a complete roof repair needs to be done. So you can see a little bit in this slightly distorted picture, you can see a little bit of the roof damage up in the right in the center of the picture there. So the gutter here has been pushed down, which leads to drainage problems. But the gutter here has been pushed down by the ice and has yet to be repaired. So again, just another example of some of the issues associated with the roof coming down. The second floor, just so people know, the second floor is not inhabited. It's just attic space. There's a fairly large roof area, but it's not inhabited. And then exterior doors. Although this door is an exterior door, it's actually designed to be an interior door used in an external application. Which is not the best. It's in actually surprisingly good shape given that. What is happening this is the bottom of a door, just shows some of the rust that is occurring at the bottom of the doors. So most of these exterior door frames and doors need to be replaced. Ideally, to prevent some of the moisture from getting at these doors, there should be better exterior entryways built so that we don't have the same issue happen again. So just something to keep the rain off, and also something to keep the rain and snow off of people as they enter the building, to the extent they use these particular doors. So the interior of the building, as I say, we're about to embark on a painting project, but you can see the condition of the cabinets in this picture. Actually, this picture looks pretty good compared to what the cabinets actually do look like. They're falling apart, is the easiest way to put it, and the countertops are not in particularly good shape. They've really been worn down to the laminate's been worn right through, and so those should be replaced as well. I mentioned the floor tiles. Some of them need replacing. This is an area, and it's an interesting dynamic because it's a stretch of floor tiles that runs the length of the building in two different areas, and so once somebody comes in to strip the floors, they're going to have some problems with these tiles that are kind of disintegrating, probably because they're on over an expansion joint. Expansion joint is my guess, but clearly we'll have to address some of that flooring. Again, it's not a huge expense, but it does add up. And before we strip and re-wax everything, we probably should address that. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, and I'll do this with the DPW as well, our staffing at the senior center is 4.2 people, so we've managed to get 0.2 of a person working down there. But we have the Elder Affairs Director, administrative support staff, the outreach worker, and then the nutrition site coordinator. The van driver works on a very part-time basis. In fact, we are in the process of trying to find another van driver to cover down there. Just to give you some ideas, and I know this is probably hard for you to see, but just to give you some ideas of staffing levels, Bridgewater has sort of gone through, as we all know, has gone through a difficult time, sort of in the late single digits of 2000s and into the teens. But gives you an idea of what was there and what we have there now. Happily, we're back to a fairly good staffing level. We can manage to provide a fair number of programs to the seniors in the community. But to give you an idea, back in 2005, which is the number furthest to your right as you're looking at this, we had I don't know how we got 19/100ths of a person, but it's 4.19 FTEs. That continued on until 2008. We were down to 2. There was a little reprieve in 2009, and then in 2010, I think was a tough year for Bridgewater, and we only had one full-time person there. So since then, we've very gradually grown. 2011, we had 1.5. 2012, 2. We were able to hire another one in 13, and for a couple of years, we had 3 full-time equivalents, and then in 2016, 17, and 18, we're up to basically 4. So that is good news overall. Just to give you an idea of what Lorraine does, the Elder Affairs Director provides centralized administration and management, formulates policy and provides procedural guidance, oversees operations, procurement, department personnel, capital planning, and budgetary management, and obviously establishes and maintains community relations. So it's a big job, and it's a well-used place, so she is challenged every day to provide the kinds of services I think the community wants, and indeed that's her job, is to make sure that she's trying to provide the types of programs the community wants. So just some other questions that we often hear: what's the senior center and how is it being used? Essentially now it's a multi-purpose community facility. We call it the senior center, but really it gets heavily used by a whole broad spectrum of people, and offering a whole broad spectrum of services, including health, social, nutritional, educational services, recreational activities. But again, mostly for older individuals, but it is heavily used by other groups, including the Garden Club, Girls Softball, Bridgewater Citizens for Civility and Respect, Academy Lions Club. I won't go and read through all of them, but it does get heavily used by the community, and Lorraine's been very good during the period that the town was out of the Academy building and needing meeting space. She was very good about making sure that there was space available for boards and committees as needed. So there are a few boards and committees that do still meet down there, and so that's good. What kinds of programs? What kinds of programs are we offering at the senior center? Again, I won't read through everything, but nutrition. There are Meals on Wheels programs operating out of the senior center. Lunches that operate. There's Zumba. That's not nutrition. Health and wellness programs. Under health and wellness programs, there's a host of different things. Zumba is one of them, line dancing, arthritis exercise, glucose and blood screenings, and so forth. There are obviously a lot of social activities, cribbage, painters groups, quilters, so on and so on. The center hosts a legal program, the Elder Law Month, which is May, I believe, and there are 2 or 3 legal programs offered yearly, and I think Lorraine is working on sort of an Ask a Lawyer program that has been aided by Senator Pacheco's office, if I'm not mistaken. So those are some of the legal programs. Educational programs throughout the year, there's a host of them, mostly speakers that are advertised to the broader community, not just the seniors. Triad program, which is a partnership with the Plymouth County Sheriff's, the DA's office, Bridgewater Police and Fire, and Elder Affairs. That provides some really good guidance to the seniors in our community. Every 2 years, I believe, the building hosts the Health and Public Safety Expo, which typically has over 22 vendors or agencies attending, giving a host of public safety and health advice. There's a caregiver support group, which meets twice monthly. We run the fuel assistance and Medicare open enrollment and health insurance counseling programs out of the senior center. There's an intergenerational pen pal program. Obviously, I think that all the counselors know of the holiday events, which they do a great job with down there. Hopefully, now that there's a better kitchen in place and knock on wood usable, we'll restart the cooking demonstrations. And then obviously there's ongoing outreach through the outreach coordinator. And then some transportation services, which include twice weekly shuttle services with our van, which I'll mention in a moment. And then also, they do try to coordinate the Dial-A-Bat services from the senior center as well. Dial-A-Bat, just so folks know, is a program that's run through Brockton Area Transit Authority, and it's essentially a call-up service. You need to qualify, but BAT will come and pick you up at your door, bring you to an appointment, doctor's appointment, and so forth. So it is a service that is spearheaded out of the senior center. What are the most pressing needs? Well, this is sometimes a shifting dynamic. Right now, the items on the current capital plan are a vehicle, a new van to replace the 2005 model. 2005 model only has 33 and change thousand miles on it, but it is rusting and in places that are difficult to make repairs. So that does need to be replaced. The other item on the capital plan currently is the generator, which is the whole building generator, which would essentially allow the center to be a congregation point in at times, either a cooling station, a heating station, at times when there are widespread power outages. So, having said that those two items are on the capital list, obviously I've just outlined a whole bunch of things that probably, well, some of them don't rise to the level of being on the capital plan just because of the level of expenditure, but there are items there that do. Certainly the driveway or the parking lot rather is one of those big items that needs to be on the plan. So as the plan gets formulated over the next several weeks, those will be added to the list, and you'll be able to see those. So that is very basically the senior center. We do have, as I say, a number of issues that we need to address down there, and I think the seniors have been very patient. When I arrived about 4 years ago, there were a whole list of things that needed to be done. Unfortunately, there were a whole list of things that needed to be done all over town, and we've been able to stabilize some of those other areas. So it really is time to try to devote some attention to these needs. So that is that's a very brief. Hopefully it was very brief, but very brief presentation. I'm happy to answer questions about that one.
Questions for the town manager? Mr. Perry.
Just a couple. So I saw you listing the van situation up there. Obviously seeing, and was that something that we purchased new at the time in 2005?
I believe that was I wasn't here, but my recollection about the van is that it was purchased new and that the university funded some of that. and we may have gotten a particularly good deal from the dealership.
Okay. Again, so being in 2005 and only having under 34,000 miles, it seems like in that time frame we didn't use it a ton. So going forward, I don't know if it would be a better avenue to look as far as leasing a vehicle as opposed to purchasing. I'm not sure on the legalities of it all and how it might work for the town. But seeing that we're not putting a whole lot of mileage on a van, so to speak, that it might be a cost-effective solution to potentially lease as opposed to purchase. That would be one idea.
That's a great idea. The other idea that I know I've been, that the BAT administrators approached me with, BAT does recycle some of their vehicles, and so that's the other option for us is to get it is a used vehicle, but BAT's very good about giving it to cities and towns within their service area in pretty good shape. So.
Okay. And then secondarily, I know obviously you listed the punch list there for the capital needs for the senior center. And I know the parking lot has been in drastic state of repair for a long time now. I know that being the largest item that's going to cost us over $100,000. Is there any type of way we can at least cut out that section of rough pavement and put a temporary patch until we have the funds necessary to do the whole parking lot, but at least make it functional and potentially have more room for parking and at least fill the cracks that are in the front of the building? I don't think that would take a whole lot of work, to do that type of thing, or at least a lot of cost factor, at least for the safety aspect of things.
I think for the safety aspect, you're right. I think certainly the cracks in the front. The rear parking lot probably is a larger endeavor, and not just a sort of a cut and patch. But certainly the front parking lot can be, the cracks can be filled. Some of those cracks are too large to do with the traditional crack seal that we contract with.
Some sort, maybe with that on
top.
top.
It would have, hot patch and some kind of roller. So
If that highway department could do that for us? Okay.
Mr. Haley. Other questions? All right, Mr. Columbotus.
Thank you. Mr. Dutton, is it the case that that the seniors generally use the building during the day for the most part, so it's free for other uses at night?
I think that's probably a fair assessment.
Other groups use it at night, and so I'm wondering if, I understand there might be some coordination issues with other outside groups using the building, but if we can get more mileage out of it, I think there might be greater support for increased funding if we can, provide benefits to other parts of town beyond seniors. So I don't know. That's something that I guess we should be attentive of. It seems like on the building that we kind of maintained and built the building on the cheap, and we're kind of paying for it now, right? With the case with the outside door, for example, right? With that exterior door, we use an interior rated door, and
I think you're absolutely right. The building, just the way the building is positioned and the way that the surrounding property is sloped, would lead you to believe that, well, it's just a slab. It's built on a slab. There's no basement, and that's fine. But it does need, ideally it needs, better site work to slope water away from the building and make sure it doesn't affect the foundation.
All right, thank you.
Other questions for the town manager? I'd just make one observation, and then we can move on. I just want to follow up on what Mr. Columbotus said about doing things on the cheap. Our biggest cost in the town, across every department, across schools, et cetera, is the people we hire. It's the biggest cost and the benefits they come with. We have to make sure that those costs are being held in a reasonable relationship to the revenue we expect. And we have to, and I know this has been harped on by many people on this council, budget for maintenance. We have to. And that has to be part of what we do. And if that means that we have to look in other areas to find those money, everyone has to understand that going in. It can't be a yes, all this, and it has to be yes, but in a lot of cases. Just my 2 cents. Moving on, Department of Public Works, Mr. Dutton.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's actually your comment about maintenance is well received, and that one of the things that I try to do. Did it myself. One of the things that I harp on internally operationally is that, you know, if we've got a capital project coming up, and I know the finance director does the same thing, if we've got a capital project being proposed, we need to know darn well how it's going to be staffed and how it's going to be maintained, or else we're simply not going to do it. So that your point is well taken. So moving on, Public Works. Again, this is fairly high-level overview of Public Works. I'm happy to sit down with any counselor and dig into the nitty-gritty if anybody wants to, but I thought it probably is a good time to give the council sort of a good overview, sort of similar, little similar but different to the Senior Center overview. So we have council voted a Public Works department as part of the administrative code. Public Works departments include what we call water supply, it's the water department, water pollution control, which is sewer department, structures and grounds, solid waste, and roadways. So in actuality, even though we created that, what we were actually able to staff at the time we created this, obviously water and sewer departments and roadways, also known as highway, and solid waste. So structures and grounds had such an anemic budget, we couldn't afford to hire somebody for that. So we kept that at the time in the town manager's office, and basically we're putting out fires with you know, the money that we had available. So let me start with roadways. The roadways department, also known as highway, protects, maintains, and improves town's roadway system, sidewalks, and drainage facilities. Maintains the town's shade tree program, provides snow plowing services, and does routine and emergency repairs to town vehicles and equipment. Just to give you a little bit of a taste of what we look after, we've got about 140 road miles in Bridgewater, and there are more coming online as I think Councilor Haley or Mr. Diono pointed out. When the planning board approves a project, once it's completed, the developer comes back to the council and asks for road acceptance. So to give you an idea how often that happens, back in late 80s, 87, we had 75 miles, road miles. Today we've got about double that, a little less than double, about 140. And I'll show you a slide that really hits home here in a minute. We've got over 3,500 catch basins. We've got about 300 to 400 stormwater outfalls. We are a little unsure of exactly how many we actually have. That's one of the things that we have to do as part of the new MS4 regulations, is actually map all of our outfalls. And that's a challenge because there are lots of them that have been buried and are hidden. Actually, one of these just came to light the other day on an excavation site. There was actually a culvert and a stone culvert that's buried, and that technically is an outfall that we now have to map and test on a yearly basis. There are innumerable subdivision detention basins. Every subdivision that gets approved and gets built has detention basins that require maintenance. When the town accepts the road, traditionally they've accepted also the detention basins, or drainage basins, as they're also known as. So we should be in there on a yearly basis mowing and maintaining that. Over the years, we just have not had the staff to do that, so now we're looking at tree removals, stumping, regrading, and then mowing. To give you an idea of the uphill battle that we face on that particular issue, Highway Department, Roadways Department was able to clear 3 of these detention basins in the summer of 2015 as part of their summer work. So I don't have a figure of exactly how many we actually have, but they tackled 3 of the most overgrown ones. So obviously that's a very small fraction of the total. So some of the ideas, I think, as Andrew pointed out, on road acceptance, we're talking internally about how we can maintain these, what it's going to cost to contract to maintain these, and whether it makes sense to have homeowners associations retain ownership of those to ensure that they're maintained properly. So just on the winter plowing, to give you an idea, we have now have 2 sidewalk machines. They're both heavily used. They're interchangeable summer and winter. We don't plow snow in the summer by policy, but we do cut brush back away from the sidewalk on a regular basis. So those machines do get heavily used. They're very specialized machines, and I think by definition they're prone to breakdown. But regardless, just to give you an idea of snow removal, we used to have 10 functioning trucks. A few of those now had to been taken off the road because they did not pass inspection. We have purchased a couple to make up for that, so we're not in terrible shape. Our real challenge when it comes to snow removal is trying to find private contractors that will commit to plowing. Used to take, when the town had a full complement of equipment and staff of 20 some odd, we were able to clear the roads. Now this is many years ago, before my time, but I'm told that we were able to clear all the roads in town in 2 hours. Now it takes closer to 6 hours in order to do a first pass of all our roads. So this piece isn't necessarily a budget issue. It's really just finding contractors who are willing to plow. We've come off of some really horrible snow years, and when that happens, generally contractors go away because they realize the damage that the service that they provide in the winter is doing to the trucks that they need with landscaping businesses or what have you in the summer months. So our 2018 roadways staffing has increased by 1. We've got 12 FTEs now, full-time equivalents for those that don't know. We've got the roadway superintendent, a general foreman, 1 administrative staff person. We've got 1 forestry foreman who is a working foreman. We've got 1 highway foreman who's also a working foreman. We've got 1 heavy equipment operator, and we've got 4 positions for light equipment operator. And so right now we've got 2 of those, actually 1 of those to fill. So we've got 3 on board right now. We also have a full-time mechanic, and new for 2018 is full-time position of basically an assistant mechanic to keep up with the fleet. So there are essentially 12 there. And that's important, actually. I think there are a lot of people in town, to the extent that people, to the extent that there are people that are watching this, I think a lot of people assume that we've got, 20 or 30 people that work for the highway department, and at least I know from calls that have come into the highway department that people are shocked to learn that on any given day, you probably really have 4 people who can actually get the work done on board. Water pollution control, also known as sewer, manages the wastewater collection and treatment system. They also manage the industrial treatment program, and also a laboratory within the department. Laboratory is there for a number of different required tests that have to go on every day, sometimes multiple times a day, in order for us to abide by our licensing. The operation is essentially governed by the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. It's a permit issued in conjunction with by EPA in conjunction with DEP. And ironically, it also governs stormwater now, and some of those, as an aside, some of those requirements are getting a bit onerous. But in the case of sewer, water is also the water department is also the same. You can essentially afford a breakdown in your highway department. If a truck breaks down, we fix it, and even though it may cause some inefficiency and it may take crew off the road for a period of time, nobody's been harmed, and there's really no foul. In the case of sewer and water, we really can't afford to have a breakdown. Obviously, sewer has to make sure that whatever discharge they're placing into the town river meets pretty stringent quality chemical levels and discharge levels. And similarly, water has to make sure that any time that a resident turns water on, they're getting clean, potable water out of their tap and is free of disease and other pollutants. So the thresholds for mistakes is really a lot lower, and the permits that are issued for both water and sewer sort of reflect that. They do govern very closely, very tightly, overly, well, that's my opinion, but the staffing levels that we must have, we maintain minimum staffing, and having said that, I think we do a great job in both water and sewer. In all the departments, we actually do a great job. So some of the issues affecting water pollution control, the much discussed upgrade to our sewer treatment plant, which we need to complete within the next 10 years. That's probably a $30 million upgrade. At least that's the cost estimates that we're playing with at this point. And to give you a timeline, by the year 2022, we need to have completed the upgrades for nitrogen removal. And then by 2027, we need to have completed the upgrades for phosphorus removal. So even though we got an extended timeline, DEP wanted this done in 5 years, and EPA wanted it done in 5 years. We got double the time to actually do it. It's still a challenging piece of work for us. So planning is underway currently, and the planning phase will be done in 2019, and we'll submit to EPA and DEP our plan to remediate both the nitrogen and phosphorus. So I've also said before that we're not, our limits, load limits are not any different than those being imposed on other towns in our area. So we're not arguing that. We did argue other items, but we did get a 10-year time frame in which to complete the work. So issues in the water pollution control, also known as sewer department, that we will be looking at and trying to address over the next year or so is the adoption of the final comprehensive wastewater management plan. It's designed to be a 20-year management plan. It identifies a whole lot of different things, but it does identify priority needs areas for sewering, and obviously we'll be looking to try to plan for flow increases as part of that, and also part of our EPA discharge permit. Our flow currently through the through the sewer system is about 1 million gallons a day. Our permit allows for a little bit more than that. We service approximately 30% of the town. The exceptions, so 30% of the town has sewer, and roughly 70% is on Title V systems, septic systems. The exception to that is the DOC down on Bedford Street, off of Bedford Street, does have its own treatment facility. And there is one street in Bridgewater that is tied into the Taunton Wastewater Treatment Plant through Rainham. And there's a prize for anybody that knows the name of the street.
Hill Road.
Okay, you get it. And ironically, Rainham tried. Rainham tried to
Free sample of their water.
tried to get us to double pay the bill a year or so ago, and amazingly, that they didn't. I guess their records weren't very good, and they thought we still owed them some money to provide the capital for that job, and so we were able to show them that no, we actually did pay the bill. We actually showed them the canceled check, which was good. We have 7.5 full-time equivalents in the sewer department. One's a half-time superintendent. He covers both water and sewer. One full-time administrative support staff. We've got one assistant superintendent. We have 3 licensed plant operators, and then a mechanic and an assistant mechanic. And they are kept busy running the plant and the collection system. So, water supply, also known as the water department, provides the residents and businesses in Bridgewater with safe drinking water. It's a pretty simple mission statement, but it is increasingly complex job. We have roughly 7,500 metered customers. The vast majority of that number are single-family homes. We've got about 130 miles of water mains and distribution systems, some of which are aging. I think, as some of the councilors know, we've had a number of main breaks around town, and that comes mostly due to the age of the some of the parts of the distribution system. So work is underway to identify those areas and be a little more proactive about replacing those lines, those aging lines. We have 2 water tanks, storage tanks. One is almost 1 million gallons, and the other is almost 5 million gallon capacity. Obviously, they sit, I think you all know where they sit. One's at Great Hill, and one is off of Broad Street, closer to the, further to the north. We have a couple of ongoing studies. A new well study is identifying essentially replacement wells. For those wells that are aging, we need to make sure that we can continue to provide the water that town needs. And I think the council remembers the High Street Treatment Facility, which work is currently underway, mostly planning and design work, but that's a $4.7 million facility designed to improve the water quality on the east side of town. So the water department has 10 FTEs, the half-time water superintendent, 1 administrative support staff. We've got a chief water handler, a senior water handler, and a water handler. So there are 3 folks that operate essentially in the water plants, making sure that the water is properly balanced and properly potable. We've got a half-time water distribution operator. When I mentioned that sometimes the state is a little unrealistic or a little comes down hard on communities, the state decided that water distribution operators needed to be at a certain level, licensing level, and they required all cities and towns to have that license level on staff. Well, nobody had those, well, very few people had that licensing level. So we've been looking for probably 2.5, 3 years to bring somebody on. And I think we've finally solved that problem, but we've right now got a half-time person. DEP requires that we have a full-time person to manage that distribution system, and we're continuing to work on that. But at least we've got the license in place, and we just need now to find a person or find a way to increase that to full-time. So we've got a lead man. Lead man is licensed for backflow and cross-connect water testing and surveyor and distribution systems. Heavy equipment operator, also licensed as a backflow with a backflow license. We've got 2 meter readers and 1 mechanic. The meter reader positions probably will phase out, and we will transition what will at the time, I think, be 1 employee to other duties within the water department as we embark on an ambitious goal to get all of the meters replaced and upgraded so that we can do digital electronic reading from off-site. We're not going to have to go into people's houses like we have for the last 100 years and read their meters. We'll be able to have the cloud do our work for us, and it'll help us with our billing and so forth. So solid waste. Well, we don't have a residential solid waste collection program, but we do operate a solid waste facility, as everybody knows, down on Bedford Street. We also manage a recycling program out of that site, and we also coordinate hazardous waste collection and disposal in conjunction with Covanta, who is our contracted disposal vendor. So we've got a very complex organizational chart for solid waste, and there it is. We have 1 full-time equivalent, and Rick does have a number of volunteers that come in and help him out when he needs it. So, but just 1 person operates that facility, and I want to say it's open 35 or 40 hours a week, but I can't remember the number of hours it's actually open, but it is open quite a bit. So the final piece of the DPW pie is structures and grounds. Now, this is one of those, as I mentioned earlier, this is the department, if you want to call it that, without any staff. This year, I'm happy to report that the council approved, and we are in the process of hiring part-time facilities manager, as well as 1 laborer, which is a start. I can tell you it's a start. The buildings that, not to mention the grounds, but the buildings that we need to look after, we've got about 15 municipal structures, which all require a level of maintenance. And as Councilor Fitzgibbons pointed out, haven't received a lot of maintenance at all over the past 10 or 15 or 20 years. I won't recite all the buildings, but some of them are on the list to sell, and some of them the council has approved sale lease arrangements or what have you. So we're in the process of going out to bid on some of those. We also have, I believe we have 6 town-owned cemeteries. The number is hard to pin down because I know we have a couple of abandoned cemeteries, and the law in Massachusetts says if there's an abandoned cemetery, your town is lucky enough to be the owner of that after it's been abandoned. So that's sort of a fluctuating number, but we think we have 6 town-owned with perhaps an abandoned cemetery here or there. So obviously, given the fact that we have 15 structures which require maintenance, and we're looking at a facility staff of 1.5 people, we're not going to be asking those 1.5 people to do all the work. because that's an uphill battle. However, we are looking at this as a very good opportunity to see what the private sector can do for us. Essentially our model, for those that have been paying attention, the town has had to take over the expense for a lot of the landscape maintenance around town, basically everything but the town common. So this is actually, as much as it was a little unexpected on our side, but it is a good opportunity for us to demonstrate what we can do with the private sector under a contract. So we'll probably use that same template on our buildings. So this sort of runs in conjunction with something I talked about a long time ago, and something that we're working internally on. But with the 1.5 people, we'll get a much better idea of what needs our buildings have. We'll go through a capital planning exercise this year, which will identify all of the town buildings, their ultimate use and their ultimate purpose, and the real cost to maintain those. And just to give you an example that I came up with as I was putting notes together, it costs us about $4,000, probably a little just shy of $4,000, simply to maintain the elevator in this building. Roughly the same amount for the elevator in the police station. Obviously, we don't do that internally, and I don't think anybody, other than maybe the city of Boston, does that internally. But that's a good example of an area where we will contract out for a elevator maintenance company to do those, and also do the inspections on a yearly basis. So that's the model. That and the landscaping are sort of the models that we need to use in order to make sure that we're properly maintaining our buildings, including the HVAC in some of the newer buildings, which requires some technical expertise. So those are things that we probably shouldn't and won't touch with our own employees, but we do need to go out and look for the private sector to provide that service. So in 2012, so how do we fund that? In 2012, we had a building maintenance budget, it was really everything, of about $12,000. Today it's more like $35,000. And quite honestly, for the buildings that we need to look after, just maintain, not even the capital expenses, it probably should be more in the neighborhood of about $150,000. So we've done, over the years, I think we've done a very fair job of very gradually building back capacity within a number of departments. This is now where our focus has to be, and we have to continue to build the capacity in structures and grounds so that we don't face, and I've said it many times, I know the counselors have said it many times, so we don't face falling down buildings for lack of maintenance. So anyway, I mentioned that we hired a half-time, we're about to hire a half-time facilities manager and one full-time laborer to help us with some of the fairly simple stuff. So the DPW Director, again, very similar to all the other directors, provides centralized administration and management, formulates policy, and provides procedural guidance, oversees operations, procurement, department personnel, capital planning, and budgetary management, and establishes and maintains community relations, which is a key component, I think, particularly in this position. We have not been able to fund this position in 2017 nor in 2018. I would anticipate us looking to fill this position in 2019 or 2020 as we, again, as I say, as we gain more capacity to do that. Just in terms, well, let me go to the next slide. Just give you an idea of different staffing levels, all put on one chart. To your left are FY 2018 staffing levels, and you probably, well, you can see it somewhat. The light blue line towards the top is Roadways, and you can see since the low point in 2010, we've very gradually increased numbers there. You can see back where it was back in 2005. There were 18, I think prior to that. I can show you a slide, but prior to that, it was even up into the 22, 23 full-time equivalents. So we're probably almost half of where we were at the height. That's neither good nor bad, just a matter of information. The water department has been fairly consistent. That's the brown line immediately below. They're right now at 10 full-time equivalents. Basically, water and sewer at exactly where our permits require the staffing to be, not more. Then the bottom is the yellow shaded line is solid waste with our one full-time equivalent in our structures and grounds, which was non-existent for probably the last 7-8 years, and now we're climbing back up. So that's basically what I just went over in a different format. All of this I'll post on our website, so anybody that wants to take a look can. Questions that may be asked: why don't you just form a DPW? Well, we did. The administrative code did create that structure, and now we are slowly migrating to a more cohesive DPW, and that process and that endeavor probably will take at least several more years as we are able to devote funding to that. So it won't happen overnight. Can the town simply send employees to help out other departments? Absolutely, and this does happen with some frequency. However, staffing levels, as I mentioned, specifically in water and sewer, are governed by statute and regulation. So we are challenged sometimes to be able to pull some of those folks off of their positions and devote them to other places. That said, we do a lot of training, and we do a lot of safety, insurance provided safety initiatives as a group, and when it comes time to plan for projects, the employees of all the DPW departments are involved in whatever initiatives they may be required to be part of. So. Why don't the Public Works Department share resources? They absolutely do. There is, as I mentioned, there's a lot of cooperation among the departments, including equipment sharing, project coordination, planning, et cetera. And the best question of all that we get is, why don't you just hire more people? Well, I think as you've heard tonight, people are extremely expensive. Does the Roadways Department need more people? They probably do, but we are really looking very hard at what we can do without hiring people, and trying to see if there is value in privatizing some of the things that we have to do on a regular basis that are better done by the private sector than are done by the public sector. So that. That's kind of what our focus is. So coming up, what are the needs? Obviously, trying to find a working DPW director. And when I say that, there are some towns that have, I guess it's a luxury, I don't know, I'd be bored silly, but have the luxury of hiring people to oversee, and that's basically what they do, is just oversee. In Bridgewater, we don't do that. We run a very lean staff. And I consider all our department heads to be working department heads, including myself. So I'm certainly not above doing whatever it needs to be done to further the cause of Bridgewater and get us moving in the right direction. So So looking forward, we'll be looking at a DPW director. We will also be looking to do some work at the highway barn. The highway barn now is over 20 years old. The roof is in need of some dramatic help. But it's also, and this will come up probably later on over the winter, I would like to consolidate the administrative side of the DPW in one place, and that's the area that I've identified as probably the best place to get everybody in one spot. And so that would require a little bit of renovation and some little bit of addition to the office side of the building. So that is coming up because we really do need to consolidate water, sewer, highway, town engineer in one spot and really create some synergies there. So that is it. I'll happy to answer questions.
Questions for the town manager? Mr. Columbotus.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. One question I have is how have we been performing any maintenance on parks, passive rec parks up until now?
We've been relying on our very faithful park stewards, parkland stewards, on pretty much all of our passive rec endeavors. We actually have a graduate MPA student from Bridgewater State helping us to actually come up with an implementation plan on the passive rec and what do we call passive? Oh, geez. Well, the plan that we most recently did.
Recreational needs, yeah.
Recreational needs, passive rec plan, and coming up with an implementation plan, knowing that the constraints, the fiscal constraints that we have. And he's actually, midway through his project, so he's coming up with some good things. So our passive rec, obviously we need to be able to, do very basic things like pick up garbage at these sites. But we will be relying on a core of volunteers, and I think our focus, at least in the short term, is going to be to try to, really galvanize some volunteer efforts and devote them to some of those parks that are actually really pretty special parks.
All right, thanks.
Other questions for the town manager, Mr. Perry?
Thank you. So with the situation that we can't get a DPW director till 2019, 2020. So are we officially forming that DPW at that time, or are we taking steps to form that sooner than a director's in place? And if so, how will that operate without a director in place?
I think it's safe to say that the DPW exists right now. All the departments work very well together. They're in constant communication, throughout any given day. But what we do miss is, one person, for lack of a better way to put it, one person that can really, drive the train in the consistent and correct direction. So, we're not doing a bad job. I guess the good part of just being able to sort of handle, putting out fires, just being able to put out fires at this point, which is really what, sort of what we do. The good side is that, we haven't had the opportunity to really plot a course. So we don't, we're not struggling to try to figure out, exactly, what direction the train has to go in. We're just trying to make sure that we cover the very basics at this point. So as we try to build more capacity in all those departments that make up the DPW, then there'll be more room to really point the direction. And a lot of work will be done with community and economic development, and there already is. I mean, Andrew mentioned a lot of coordination with water and sewer. Water and sewer service drives, along with zoning, water and sewer service really drives economic development. If you have water and sewer service available to a particular piece of property, it's a commercial property, well, then it's a much more attractive proposition for a business to come into than if you don't. And I think we saw some of that on Elm Street, where for a period of time there were lots available, but there was water but no sewer. then there was sewer, there was no electric for a long time, and then finally there got to be some electric. So those are the kinds of things that, that centralized DPW director can really sort of plow forward and make sure we're coordinating on and sort of firing on all cylinders.
Right, I certainly look forward to that, because that's certainly, I think, and as we talk about trying to bring business to town, is what we need is infrastructure in place to bring that business to town. So I think that's a step in the right direction. And just, if you allow me, one other small question. When it comes to, parks and repair and different things, I do have concerns about the condition of the gazebo at Legion. I know we are probably hosting the next Tri-Town Veterans event here. I would certainly like to see that in better condition for when that comes up. Do we have the possibility of doing any repairs on that in the near future?
Short answer is yes. I know Charlie Simons is in the process right now of, I know he's gotten prices on wrought iron railings that would replace either the wood or the plastic ones that are there, and also the roof. I think the roof needs to be done as well. So he's looking at getting pricing on that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the town manager? Mr. Haley?
You had mentioned, Mr. Jutton, an ambitious plan in regards to the electronic or digital metering. Is there a timeline for that plan?
I don't want to speak too soon on that, but I know that we've already done a test phase with some of those, and I think over the next 3 years, Jonas is trying to secure the funding, or will be trying to secure the funding to get that project done within the next 3 years. That's a project that should, if all goes well, and our engineers are correct, that's a project that should pay for itself. So it's pricey. I think it's a $3 million project, but it should pay for itself.
Other questions for the town manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to the town manager's report, which I assume is going to be very brief, after we just heard from him for an hour and a half.
One can only hope.
Developing a complex. Yes, let me give you very briefly my manager's report, which is really just sort of, much of which I've already said. I just want to give you an idea. We'll obviously, after this meeting, go on a little bit of a break with a meeting in August. But I do want to let you know what we will be working on this summer. Andrew alluded to the disposition of the McElwain, also the town hall, also the Spring Street garage. We will continue to work with the architect on improvements to the memorial building. We'll begin to plan highway barn renovations, also begin to plan more earnestly on fire station replacement, continue the Mitchell School planning work, finalize the housing production plan, finalize the complete streets pedestrian safety plan, look for funding to do the 25% design for the Elm Street improvements, which Andrew had mentioned. The retail cannabis committee work will continue, and we'll be looking to try to formulate any, if there are any zoning changes to be brought before the council. We'll try to get that done before year end. Zoning particular to the retail cannabis. We're finalizing the financial forecasting tool, and we'll be bringing you a 5-year projection in the fall. Finalizing capital plan and presenting that prior to the fall. Coach committees, this is actually important. We'll be reaching out to the committees and trying to coach them on strengthening, the town attorney and I, strengthening their land use decisions. So that those decisions can withstand a legal challenge. Continuing to discuss potential 40B with the Claremont Group and begin the strategic planning process with the Strategic Planning Committee. So that's kind of what we got on our plate for the summer, and everybody I talked to says, oh, summer's over already, so good luck. So that is it for me.
Questions for the town manager, Mr. Souza?
It's not a question. One of my constituents called me. She wanted me to tell you that she was almost run over going from the Common over to my sister and I's restaurant. And she said the speed limit in that area is absolutely ridiculous. And she wanted you and all the people downtown, where she frequently goes to, that she may never, ever step foot in this area again. Her life is worth more than that. So I drove all around the blocks and looked at all the streets coming into the square. And I was surprised myself to find that 35, 30, 35, 35 into the square. How can we expect people to go through there at 35 miles an hour and stop for somebody in the crosswalk? They don't want to. They're going to just keep on plowing. So she'd like to know, how long is it going to be before something is done to correct some of that speed problem down there? Either put up some speed limit signs to lower the speed, enforcement, put a sign on every single crosswalk saying stop for pedestrians because the motorists don't know they're supposed to. She wants to know what's going to be done. And she said she will definitely pull this night's council meeting up on her TV and try to see what happens.
That's actually a great question. The things we can do very simply and quickly, one of them is to check the speed limits. If the speed limits posted speed limits are above what we're allowed to do in the square, then yeah, we can do that very quickly. Police chief does do a fairly good job of patrolling. Obviously, the best scenario would be have somebody there all the time, but that's not feasible. But we do both plain clothes, plain car, and uniformed and cruiser patrol in the square quite frequently. I think the complete streets plan, when that comes out, that'll have a bunch of sort of traffic calming measures that I'm hoping that we can adopt and fund. And that's really, you can beat people over the head, but you can it's amazing. You can't stop them from flying through the common. I look out the front window on occasion, and every time I look out the front window, I can see a near miss. So I know.
One more.
Mr. Souza.
Okay. One more thing. I received an email. I think we all received the same email about a posting of school zone 20 miles an hour on South Street not working. And this gentleman said he believed it hasn't been working for a while and hopes that we can get that resolved before the first day of school. It's our children going to school and leaving school. It's extremely important that we get that done. Do we need an order for that?
I'll take a look. I didn't get that email, so I'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Other questions for the town manager? Mr. Columbotus, then Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Dutton, I noticed on some of the striping on the entrances to the two big pharmacies in town, both the Walgreens Plaza and where CVS is, the line separating the ingress versus egress is really non-existent. So I'm wondering what sort of regulations we have for how that's private property. I assume the owner of the property needs to maintain that striping. So I'm wondering if we could take a look at that.
Yep.
And so I'm wondering how we can get that striping redone. And also on our end, it seems like some of the striping out on Plymouth Street, certainly right out by the farm supplies, is pretty virtually non-existent. So I think it would make sense to look at some of these worn striping in especially densely traveled areas.
I do know that Ron has the striping company coming in. I don't know what the exact schedule is, but I know he has scheduled them to come in and do some of that. So obviously not the ones at CVS.
And then one more question is, I'm wondering where we're at with the municipal parking lot. Is that, I guess I'd like a little bit of clarity as to what will be involved in that project and what the timeline is for getting that work done.
The short-term plan for the parking lot would be to clear it, take out all the obstructions. I don't think the plan, well, at least the plan was not to necessarily repave it, but we could reconfigure the lot to accommodate more vehicles. I think we're only waiting on funding at this point, and I know the timeline originally, we would have wanted to get something done by fall. I don't know if that's feasible at this point or not, so I'll find out.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple questions. The treasurer collector's position, can you give us a status on where we are with that? And do we have the current consultant staying on board for a while or what?
Answer to your second question is yes, she's going to stay on board for a little while longer, which is great news for us, and we'll have an we're using her expertise to really retrench and try to figure out a different way to go about a recruitment. So we probably won't do that immediately, but she has agreed to stay on, which is great news for us.
And what's the status of finding a new treasurer collector?
As soon as we get revised posting, we'll get one up. We want to make sure we do it right, obviously, and Angela's helping us with that. So I don't have a specific timeline yet. I certainly will by August meeting.
Why wouldn't you post the position like now? Or
Because we've got probably our best person willing to stay on a little longer, and she is great. She's cleaned up. Tony hopefully will come in at your August meeting and really give you some background about where the finance department has come overall. But we've been able to clean up a lot of things with Angela's help, and we're just as happy to have her stay on a little bit longer just to tie up some of those loose ends.
So there isn't anybody else that was in the pool of candidates that you would want to seek out to offer the job to?
There may have been actually a couple people, and that's kind of what we're talking about right now.
Okay. The RFPs for the use of the town hall and what to do with the McElwain, are those in a committee, or have those been approved for you to send out?
I'm almost finished, essentially finished drafting the McElwain one, and I'm just working on the town hall one. And I'll circulate those as soon as they're done. McElwain I can circulate by the end of the week.
Okay, but the authority has been given to you to get those out. There's nothing more to come to us for approval.
We've already
Right.
approved that.
I did commit to circulating the RFPs, and I will, just for comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have a time frame on that?
I would like to, right now I'm shooting for September 6th as a return date on the McElwain.
Okay.
So return of proposals. And I know Andrew's had a number of discussions. I don't know where they will go or if they will go anywhere on potential leasing a town hall as office space.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the town manager? Seeing none, we'll move on. There are no discussions. Committee reports? Anyone want to make a committee report? Seeing none, we'll move on to legislation for action. We have Order 2017-040, creation and distribution of an informational postcard. Ms. Loesch has been added as a sponsor, so we can move this forward this evening. Is there a motion to, it hasn't been referred to a committee, so we can take it up tonight. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Made by Ms. Loesch.
Second.
Second by Mr. Haley. Ms. Loesch, would you like to make an amendment?
Just wanted to call out the date. We've, per the discussion last week, we took that out, but there's no other additional changes.
So we made a motion to strike the word date from the order. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. George. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. On to the discussion of the order as a whole. Ms. Loesch, anything further? Mr. Haley?
No.
Further discussion from the council? Seeing none, this requires a roll call vote.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to Order 2017-040, removal and replacement of dead trees in downtown area. Again, this was not referred to any committee, so we're able to move forward on it tonight. with the presence of Mr. Souza as the sponsor. Would you like to make a motion to approve, Mr. Souza?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. George. Mr. Souza, discussion?
It's a long time coming. One more little note I'd like to make. I was down driving Broad Street today, looking for the speed limit signs, and I found signs buried in the branches of the trees that did survive. So while they're cutting the dead ones down, maybe they can do some trimming to make those branch signs appear.
Thank you. Mr. George?
No.
Further discussion? Seeing none, this also requires a roll call vote?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Moving on, we have no old business. Moving on to new business. Proposed ordinance D FY 18001, establish a stabilization fund. Essentially, this establishes a stabilization fund for the purpose of accepting one-time gifts and for unforeseen expenditures. It's part of kind of the new, a new part of Mass General Law. You know, we need to send this to the Budget and Finance Committees, discussion on this. So is there a motion to send it?
Oh,
Made by
second.
Mr. Haley, seconded by Mr.
yeah.
Gallagher. Mr. Haley, discussion. Mr. Gallagher?
That's good.
Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of referring to the Budget and Finance Committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. And this type of thing that we're looking at right here is exactly why we need the previous ordinance. Order FY 18001, acceptance of a gift from Bridgewater State University. There's been plenty of press about this, so I'm sure people have heard about it. But we do need to move it to the Budget and Finance Committees for approval and coming back to us. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Made by Mr. Souza, seconded by Mrs. Loesch. Mr. Souza, any discussion?
No.
Ms. Loesch?
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mr.
Gallagher?
Can you, I guess clarification is, this seems to be a regular and recurring gift from the town of Bridgewater, from the university, which is great. But when you started out, you said,
Oh, yeah.
why would this go in that account?
I was thinking gifts in general.
Okay. This necessarily would not go into that account? Okay.
No, but more along the lines
yes,
of when
understood. Yeah,
somebody
thank
wants
you.
to donate something. I thank you for calling me out when I misspoke
Right.
there.
No,
Thank you.
That's it.
All right, on the motion to refer to the Budget and Finance Committees, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to citizens' comments. Ms. Boyle. Oh,
Got a few.
you could just identify yourself when you get up there.
Good evening. It's nice to see you all again. Mr. Dutton, I'd like to say that you did a fine job, especially when you listed all the activities of the senior center. Missed one or two, three, but you got most of them. Where I might disagree was on the staffing. Many of our staff are not paid for by the town of Bridgewater. So when you look at full-time equivalents, you're not paying for all of them. You're paying for 3 anyway. Excuse me. As far as the pictures and the number of items that you listed as being not done, and some are done, that has gone on for years. I've been on that council, it was the Council of Aging, for many years, and we were always asking for things to be repaired, replaced, things like that. You outlined many of the things that still need to be done on the maintenance end of it. Could I ask just one question? When will it happen?
At this point, Ms. Boyle, I apologize, but public comment is for
All right.
folks to comment, and I'd ask the town manager to get back to you via phone call or an email or something like that, so that we can keep the flow moving, so.
The question was more rhetorical than an answer being
I'm sure.
expected tonight, believe me.
It sounds like you've asked it for A year or two before this as well.
Oh, how about 6 or 7? How about
Do you
back to
remember-
the
do you
time
remem-
when we were dealing
You
with
remember
selectmen?
the windows in the Mitchell
I
and
could
the
comment
Williams?
on the van. The mileage is not a true factor of that van. There are many problems with it, and we use it on a local basis. We don't do anything really more than market basket, I guess is about the furthest thing. So that, yes, the van is a decided need. If to go to the renovations, which is very important, we had an incident up there today, and I don't know if you've heard about it. Okay, you have. All of the sudden, I guess the vent over the stove, apparently it was never cleaned, never done or something, because all these black pellets came tumbling out, and the area is covered with black powder. The other things that concern me is that the cleaning and everything that was supposed to be done by the contractor, much of it was done by the staff because they wanted to get the kitchen up and running so that they could take care of the obligations that we have to the seniors. I think that should be considered when we argue against what money is owed to us, or to, I shouldn't say us, to the town fund at the Hunt Center. We appreciate all of the care and concern that you have shown, and we did some math, and Bridgewater, in its budget, spends about $30 on the 4,800 people that are senior citizens in this town. Now, we know we need fire and police and all of that, and they're important, and I will say this. Our police and fire do wonderful work, and that we do appreciate what they do for us, especially the seniors in town. But we also know that we need to be sure that the money for the renovations is expended and we get our money's worth. And I think there are several other items that, Peter, that we gave you the list that things need to be done. And we're hoping that by September, we will finally have a fully functioning renovation project. Thank you. We thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hunt.
Carlton Hunt, 80 Austin Street. 3 points. With respect to the sewage treatment upgrade, the phosphorus limits that are imposed, that's an incredibly expensive upgrade to remove phosphorus. And I would hope that the program will be looking at source control. Where does the phosphorus come from into our sewer system? It's primarily households unless we have runoff coming into the sewer system, and that's called, it's combined sewer and street runoff. If they're separated, it shouldn't be an issue. So what I'm concerned with on that particular piece is that the state's requiring us to spend again, it's very expensive to remove phosphorus when it may not be needed. So I would like to look at possible source control measures that the town can impose. For example, no phosphate detergents used in town, that kind of thing. So there may be other options, and I'm hoping that the consultant that we have on board will be looking at that. I'm more than happy to consult with them about this. I've got a little bit of background in that. The second thing regarding the senior center, Green Communities funding that we apply for every year, if anything about the windows, the doors, anything of that type that might be classified as energy efficiency improvements, we're sort of run the table on our Green Communities support needs. But for the next year, we could put that into the budget. So that's one thing I would like to make sure that as Energy Committee Chair, I would like us to be considering that kind of thing. Anything that's being upgraded, if it's energy related, we may be able to get a little bit of state funds for that. The other piece is, as we look at that, the building is oriented and it's not close to trees. I would like to look at the possibility of putting solar on that building, potentially behind the meter so that in the daytime, whatever energy's being demanded in the building is actually not even metered into the National Grid system. So it's really the cost of installation, and then we save the cost on actually the energy. And at nighttime, because of backups, might be different. I'd like to look at that also if we can. The third piece is the Mandela Scholars. I'm not sure if everybody understands what it took for those people to get to this point. This year, over 64,000 people applied for the Mandela Scholarship Fund. 1,000 were accepted. Very intensive application process and et cetera. Essays, all sorts of things. I can speak to this because several of those are people that I'm trying to help mentor, and the town clerk is also. So out of 1,000 people, there's only 2 institutions in New England that has accepted the 25 people that are at the university right now. I think the town and the university should be quite proud that we're supporting this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to council comments. We'll start with Ms. Loesch.
Okay. Yes, I want to echo the last part of what Mr. Hunt was saying. The Mandela Fellows were great to meet tonight and hear their stories and be frightened of some of them, so don't do anything wrong. And I want to thank the 4th of July Committee for a great festival and parade and fireworks and day for the town. Everyone I spoke to, including my family, we had a great time. I just wanted to thank them for all their hard work and to start fundraising for 2018.
Thank you. Mr. Perry.
Thank you. My apologies for missing last meeting. I was away on vacation. Unfortunately, was not here to see the town's 4th of July, but I heard it was wonderful. Did see some footage on Facebook, so I felt like I got to see a little bit of it in that regard. Just want to thank all the people who were reappointed here tonight. We want to thank them for their dedication and volunteerism and all the variety of different commissions and committees that they've been reappointed to. So thank you to all of them. And that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Mr. Haley.
4th of July, being in the parade was great. Being in the parade with my son Declan cheering for Happy Birthday America was wonderful, an experience I'll never forget. He gets better every year, and he's probably going to be running for some office when he's old enough. In regards to the Mandela Washington Fellows, I had the pleasure of meeting several of them many times, and I make sure to point out to them that though they're here to try and learn from what we have to offer, I think we have much more to learn from them than they'll possibly ever learn from us. So if you haven't had a chance to speak with any of them at all, make sure you do, because it's a great discussion and a great learning experience for us, me personally. Couple of notes. This morning when we had that torrential downpour, I don't know if anybody got caught in that trying to drive to work. I was heading out of town towards Plymouth where I work, and saw one of the roadway folks in a roadway truck in a yellow shirt getting drenched, shoveling out one of the drainage spots. So to know that we're short-staffed for a lot of that stuff, and to see that these guys are out there early in the morning getting soaked to make sure that we can get to work on time is awesome. So thank you to whoever that was. And then in regards to the van, the 2005 van that lay sitting for a long period of time, with ride sharing and Uber and Lyft and the like, there's a recent entrepreneurial trend to also have busing ride sharing. I know there's a couple of companies that have been kicking around the South Shore in the Boston area, so that might be a consideration moving forward, rather than carrying the expense of a van and maybe procuring services of a ride-sharing, people-moving company.
Thank you. Mr. Souza.
Okay. The people here at the evening, the Washington group, a couple of them I met at the introductory dinner that they had at the university. Very, very glad to be able to be there. And just want to thank all the volunteers who stepped up to the plate again. As we often hear, we're short of people, and those who run from year to year, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple comments tonight. Again, I want to thank the Mandela Scholars for coming in tonight. I've had an opportunity to meet with them 3 times, once at the neighbors' dinner a few weeks ago, and last evening. The Hunts were very gracious of sponsoring a clam bake at their house for a lot of them and a few of us, so it was great to sit down and meet with a few of them last evening as well. And as Mr. Hunt said, I mean, these are distinguished people in their communities in Africa and the countries they come from. And they all have very good stories, are well-educated, and obviously they're continuing their studies in public policy and so forth. And every year, I believe this is the 3rd year the university has sponsored them, or 2nd year. And I'm sure that'll be an ongoing program, but it was very nice meeting them. And again, I want to thank the entire 4th of July committee for putting on, once again, a great festive day here in the town of Bridgewater a week ago tonight, starting with the parade and our banner that we have now, which we got to carry through, was a big hit, and the arts festival on the Common capped off with a beautiful fireworks display. It was just a nice day. Thank you.
Mr. Columbotus.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Mr. George.
Just a couple things. So I want to echo just the incredible opportunity I had, as well as my family had, to meet some of the Mandela Scholars last night. It's pretty, I don't know what the word is, to have a president of an organization who's going to start his own political party, or a member of parliament saying that they have to meet with me before they leave, just to have a conversation, which is, just kind of awe is really the only word I can say. And as Mr. Hunt said, for not only being picked, out of a very large pool, but their accomplishments, and I'm going to say a fairly short period of time, because I'm showing my age, is just incredible. So I hope if people can hear this, hopefully they will eventually, that they get the opportunity to meet them as well. The 4th of July, not only do I want to just really say thank you to the committee. There's one thing I want to point out that I found out after the fact, and this is a good thing, but it's also something that unfortunately we have to deal with in today's day and age. So there was some very large equipment along the parade route that was blocking off the streets, which I thought was just a nice gesture, which is actually the level of security now that the 4th of July committee has to do to protect our safety. Not only that, but all of the equipment was supplied by area businesses free of charge. So not only would I say thank you to the committee for that foresight, but also to the businesses that dedicated their equipment to help all of the people marching and all of the people watching the parade safe and sound. It's pretty sad that we have to get to that point, but I do appreciate the fact that they went to that level to protect us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. I just want to echo what everybody said about the 4th of July, that the committee, a very small core group, does a tremendous job, raises a tremendous amount of money, and we couldn't be prouder of them as a community. We couldn't be prouder of hosting the Mandela Washington Scholars here as a community with our partner, Bridgewater State University. I was pleased that some took the opportunity to come in here on our invitation and talk a little bit about themselves and really show the level of commitment they have to, public service and what they want to do back in their own home countries, and hopefully are able to take something away from their time here with us. But I think I agree with Mr. Haley Moore. We can probably take more away from our time with them. So that having been said, I don't believe we need an executive session, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Made by Ms. Loesch, seconded by Mr. Haley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.